About 6-7 weeks ago, I made a video about Klarna. In that video, I said that CEO Sebastian Siemiatkowski will attempt to dump his shares on the stock market due to Klarna's severe underperformance and his extreme exposure to AI through his investment firm. And although he didn't dump his shares on the stock market yet, he did dump them on his investment firm, which caused it to drop 17%. Can't say I didn't warn you. He really is the final boss of current market hype. A man who owns one of the biggest BNPL companies and an AI investment firm has to be shivering his fucking timbers right now. Why? Because everyone knows there's an AI bubble. But what very few people know is the fact that there are 3 possibilities for what's gonna happen next. But before we talk about what those 3 possibilities are, let me just provide you with some scary numbers to put the bubble into perspective. We're starting off with the infamous AI Ouroboros, and most of you have probably seen this one already, and while it's not perfectly accurate by any means, it's certainly accurate enough to understand how the industry financials work. An incestuous mess of promises and expectations driven by a lot of speculation. Speaking of speculation, AI startups accounted for 57% of all global venture capital invested in the first quarter of 2025, and 95% of generative AI projects have failed to meet ROI expectations. If you want further evidence, here's Sam Altman and Jensen Huang saying some not so favorable things about their own companies, who just so happen to be 2 of the biggest players in the entire space.
How can a company with 13 billion in revenues make 1.4 trillion of spend commitments? You know, and you've heard the criticism,
First
Sam.
of all, we're doing well more revenue than that. Second of all, Brad, if you want to sell your shares, I'll find you a buyer. I just, enough. We do plan for revenue to grow steeply. Revenue is growing steeply. We are taking a forward bet that it's going to continue to grow.
China has some of the best entrepreneurs in the world because they came from some of the best STEM schools in the world. We're up against a formidable, innovative, hungry, fast-moving, under-regulated one. Some of the things I heard, they could never build AI chips. That just sounded insane. 2, that China can't manufacture. China can't manufacture? If there's one thing they could do is manufacture. 3, they're years behind us. Is it 2 years, 3 years? Come on, they're nanoseconds behind us.
Nanoseconds.
Yeah, they're nanoseconds behind us.
There is so much more in regards to this bubble, so if you want a more concise breakdown of what's happened so far, The Plain Bagel made a great video about it, and he explains it far better than I ever could. I'll link it in the description below. What I'm personally far more interested in is what's gonna happen next. And yes, I know some of you are screaming at your screens right now telling me past performance is not indicative of future results. And yes, that is true, but what I can't tell you with absolute certainty is line go up or line go down. I know, I'm a fucking genius. I can also tell you that the warning signs are already here. Several major AI startups have already failed, and some are already intertwined with the federal government. And even though the government has denied the possibility of a future bailout, there's a couple of things to remember with that statement. Personally, I think OpenAI already having floated this idea with the federal government should be alarming enough to pop the entire bubble. And if you've kept up with the current news cycle, you should know that taking the current administration by their word is probably the biggest mistake you can make.
I was not a fan of his, that I can tell you.
If you think the AI bubble will continue to grow at the rate it currently does, then you also indirectly believe that the government will get more and more involved in the industry, because that's exactly what's happening right now. So I'm gonna go 2 for 2 here with my previous prediction and say, AI is going to get bailed out by the US government. And yes, that is just a prediction, but if the AI Ouroboros continues at the current rate with no government intervention, it's literally going to crash the market. Like, that's literally a fact. The crazy part is that I would rather see the AI bubble completely crash the economy with no government intervention whatsoever than the government intervening when things get tough with no one learning their lesson. Now, what do I mean by that, you might ask? In the 2008 financial crisis, the banks grew so large that their risk became systemic, which later led to one of the largest bailouts in history. And that's essentially the meta for large corporations. If a massive company fucks up and takes on risk that could bankrupt the company, the easiest way to save yourself is to make your own risk so large and so systemic that if you fail, the whole economy collapses with you. And there's very clear evidence of basically the same thing happening all over again. In 2023, AI investments accounted for 25% of all venture capital investments. In 2025, this number increased to 58%. And look, invest as much as you want. I don't care. The problem is when all of these investments become a bigger and bigger part of everyone's 401k. Which is a very real thing that's happening, by the way. Look at Nvidia, for example. In 2016, they consisted of 0.7% of the S&P 500's total market cap. That number is sitting at 8% today. The 7 biggest companies, all of which are heavily involved with AI, make up 30% of the S&P. What's even worse is that some AI companies are even taking advantage of this. Palantir, for example, literally bought back enough of its stock so they could become a company in the S&P for the sole purpose of gaining passive investments from regular people with 401ks. But then again, Peter Thiel is literally Satan. So there are essentially 3 things that can happen next. Either the bubble doesn't pop and eventually matures, which, if you know anything about bubbles in a market economy, you'll know that throughout history, this has never happened even once. Whether it's the internet, cars, railroads, solar, or any kind of medicine, all of them have been bubbles at some point, and all of them popped sooner or later. The exception to this would be technologies that were created for an established purpose, like semiconductors, a technology specifically invented for the ever-increasing demand of computing power in the 60s. My point is that AI does not have an established purpose in society, not unless you count cheating your way through college. And you're not going to find that societal purpose by throwing money on it and hope it works out. So the likelihood of the AI bubble justifying its valuation without any sort of crash is so unlikely that I would pretty much discard the possibility entirely. The second possibility, on the other hand, is way more likely, and it's the one I'm personally rooting for. The bubble pops, and we basically see a .com repeat. The reason why I personally prefer this one over any other outcome is very simple. I fucking despise this crony capitalism bullshit that this current administration is engaging in. It is hypocritical to its very fucking core. Why the fuck are they taking stakes in companies like Intel? Why the fuck is this current administration sleeping around with all of these big players by giving them contracts and money just to potentially end up bailing them out whenever they inevitably fail? For a political party that is supposedly free market, you sure rely an awful lot on the government to prop up the economy. If we see another .com crash with little government intervention, there's at least a lesson learned for a little while. If a company is failing, just let it die. Let it die, let it die, let it Why does the American government feel the need to dance around with corpses for companies and use American tax dollars to keep them on a fucking respirator? Just pull the plug! Pull the fucking plug! The government simply can't incentivize incessant risk-taking like this. We'll never learn as a society if they're just gonna bail out whoever finds themselves in a tough spot. If a large company makes a mistake, they should fucking pay for that mistake like everyone else. Simple as that. But I don't think this is very likely to happen, and this brings us to our third and final possibility, and that would be a 2008 repeat, where the government intervenes when things get out of control and bails out the AI companies. As sad as I am to say this, I do believe that this is the most likely scenario, but I hope to God I am wrong, and here's why. The dollar is weak, the national debt is completely spiraling out of control. America simply can't afford this. Not to mention the fact that Mango Man has the spine of a newborn baby. All it takes is a meeting with Sam Altman and Jensen Huang to make him completely backtrack on everything this administration has said so far. But let's see what happens. Alright, everybody take 5.